Welcome to this press conference. Let me introduce you the Chief Observer of the European Union Election Observation Mission to Jordan, Mrs. Juliana Zovko, Member of the European Parliament. At her side, Andreas Schieder, Head of the delegation of 7 members of the European Parliament that joined the mission. And also Delphine Blanchet, Deputy Chief Observer of Mission, Nadine Haas, Election Analyst, and Colm Founding, Legal Analyst. My name is Michela Secchi, I'm the Press Officer of the Mission. Now the Chief Observer, Mrs. Zovko, will be taking the floor.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, dear Ambassador, Your Excellency, dear observers, and all of those who came here today to listen to our final press conference after these elections, I would like to welcome you and to tell you that I will start with the title that we gave to this preliminary statement, because title is very important in every elections, and also it will give you the general mood how we assess these elections. So the title says that well-run, inclusive elections in the context of an ambitious reform process. So the European Union Election Observation Mission has been present in Jordan since 29th of July 2024, following an invitation from the Independent Election Commission. I want to thank the IEC for the access granted to our observers from the polling station to the District Election Commission and at the IEC levels. I also want to thank all our interlocutors in Jordan for the warm welcome they granted to our mission. In total, the European Union Election Observation Mission deployed 120 observers from 27 European Union member states, Canada, Norway and Switzerland, across the country to assess the whole electoral process against Jordan's constitution, laws and Jordan's international obligations and commitments for democratic elections. A delegation of the European Parliament headed by Andreas Schieder, my left side, also joined the mission and fully endorses this statement. On election day, observers visited 622 polling stations in all electoral districts of Jordan. This preliminary statement is delivered prior to the completion of the election process. The final assessment of the elections will depend in part on the conduct of the remaining stages of the election process. In particular, the handling of possible post-election day complaints and appeals. The EU-EOM remains in country to observe post-election developments and will publish a final report containing detailed recommendations within 2 months of the conclusion of the electoral process. The EU-EOM is independent in its findings and conclusions and adheres to the Declaration of Principles for International Election Observation endorsed at the United Nations in October 2005. Jordan embarked on a political modernization process in June 2021 with the nomination by the King of the Royal Committee to modernize the political system, resulting in 2022 adoption of the election law and the political parties law. The 2024 elections were seen as particularly important with regards to these reforms aimed at making the House of Representatives more inclusive and less politically fragmented. They were held against the backdrop of the enduring conflict in Gaza, but despite the uncertainty guaranteed by such a context, Jordan showed commitment to holding them according to schedule, and we praise them for that. Previous elections in 2013, 2016, and 2020 were observed by the EU with respectively 2 election observation missions and an electoral expert mission, and a number of recommendations were reflected in the new 2022 laws. On 10th of September 2024, more than 1.6 million Jordanian voters elected the 20th House of Representatives in a professionally well-run election. Voter and candidate registration were inclusive and efficiently administered. The 138 members of the House were elected among 1,623 candidates, offering a genuine choice to the electorate. Positively, Jordan's electoral legal framework is substantially aligned with the state's commitments under key regional and international treaties related to the conduct of democratic elections. The Constitution provides for secret ballot and general direct elections based on principles of integrity, independent administration, and non-interference with the will of voters. It also articulates key fundamental rights, despite some gaps, while provision of several laws, including aspects of the cybercrime law, in particular face challenges such as limited economic opportunities, high campaign costs, and pressure from their families that affect their political engagement. Election day was assessed as calm, orderly, and smooth by the EOEOM, and list representatives were present in over 90% of observed polling stations. In 47% of polling stations visited during voting, observers noted campaign activities outside the polling stations. At the closing of the polling, the IEC announced final turnout at 32.25% of voters. The EOEOM observed the tabulation at LED and GED level and will continue its observations of the past electoral process. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm available to answer your questions, but now first I will give the floor to Andreas Schieder to read the European delegation statement. European Parliament.
Thank you, Chief Observer Celiana Sofko. Good morning, everybody, Excellencies, colleagues from the European Parliament, media representatives of Jordan, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I am Andreas Schieder, member of the European Parliament, and it is my pleasure to speak to you today. The European Parliament, which is the only directly elected body of the European Union, represents 450 million European citizens. We are committed to supporting the strengthening of democracy all over the world, and election observation is one of our key foreign policy instruments in this endeavor. I have the honor of leading a delegation of 7 members of the European Parliament to observe the parliamentary elections in Jordan. We come from 5 different countries, and we represent also 6 different political groups. Our delegation is integrated into the framework of the European Union Election Observation Mission, and I would like also to warmly thank my colleague Celiana Sofko, the Chief Observer, and her team for the excellent cooperation and the extraordinary work they are carrying out. The European Parliament delegation fully supports and endorses the preliminary findings and conclusions of the observation mission presented by the Chief Observer. We note positively the fact that Jordan, under the leadership of King Abdullah II, decided to hold elections despite the difficult regional circumstances. Prior to election day, we met in Amman, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, with the Independent Election Commission, with representatives of several political parties, with diplomatic missions, and with the representatives from civil society, media, and academia. We familiarized ourselves with your legal institutions and with the political climate in Jordan. We thank our interlocutors for their time and for their cooperation. I would like to offer some observation about the electoral process. First, we welcome the significant progress made through the adoption of the new electoral and political parties law. These reforms aim to create a more party-based parliament and enhance representation of women and young citizens. This is part of Jordan's long-term modernization of the political system, which we fully support, and that needs to be matched also with economic and administrative reforms. And this is encouraging to see that a number of these recommendations from previous EU missions have been implemented. contributing to the reform process. The requirement for public media to provide coverage of the electoral campaign remains to be implemented. In addition, some of our interlocutors expressed their concern on the self-censorship effect on the journalists of the new cybersecurity law. We urge the newly elected Parliament to actively contribute to the transition towards a truly effective multi-party system, which is the pillar of a well-functioning democracy, where tolerance, equality, inclusiveness, mutual cooperation and openness thrive. We would suggest that the political parties focus more on citizens' expectations and develop programmatic agendas that address their needs. Second, in past EU election observation mission, we encouraged lowering the age requirements for candidates to allow younger citizens to stand for elections. We were pleased that this recommendation was taken into account, enabling younger candidates to run. However, this process needs to continue. Youth engagement in the democratic life of Jordan should remain a core element of the country's democratic modernization and can contribute to diminishing the brain drain of young people. However, in a country with a large young population, also we note very positively that the higher turnout of young voters compared to the average general turnout very positive. And we encourage the new parliament and political parties to actively engage with them and address their concerns. Strengthening the legislative and scrutiny role of the House of Representatives seems key to meet the population expectations. A balanced relationship between the legislative and executive branches is fundamental of a well-functioning democracy. And third point, we acknowledge the increase in seats reserved for women and the higher number of female candidates and the substantive increase of women elected in the new parliament compared to previous elections. This shows that the new legal provision have had a positive effect. However, we encourage also further efforts to nominate more female candidates in eligible position in future elections. We also urge political parties to give women a more prominent role beyond the legal minimum quotas, further contributing to democratic consolidation. No society can be fully prosperous or free without the full participation of women in its socio-economic and political life. On election day, we observe voting in Amman, in Al-Salt, in Sherash, in Madaba and their surroundings, from the opening until the closing of the activities and including also the vote count. We would like to congratulate the Independent Election Commission and the Jordanian people for a well-organized and overall peaceful election day, especially the professional work carried out by the members of the polling stations, many of them women and young people. We also commend voters for their positive attitude during election day and the professionalism of the security forces. Campaign outside the polling station was visible in many of the polling stations we visited, contravening the legal provision of this regard and raising doubts about the exact nature and goal of such activities. We call upon political parties to abide by the law and refrain from such activities and any form of pressure on voters. Counting and tabulation were quite lengthy, yet members of the polling stations carried out their task with transparency, professionalism and patience. In conclusions, Jordan's commitment to the modernization of its own political system is commendable, and with continued effort, these reforms could strengthen also the country's democracy based on tolerance, inclusiveness, equality and openness, and promote also long-term stability. The European Union attaches great importance to its special partnership with Jordan and is working towards a closer relationship. In particular, the European Parliament follows very closely the negotiation on the strategic and comprehensive partnership agreement. We are confident that strengthening our relations can significantly contribute to long-term stability of Jordan is a common goal of our partnership and improving the economic situation, including the full recovery of the tourism sector. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now, Mrs. Zovko and Mr. Schieder will answer your questions. Our colleagues will bring you a microphone if you raise your hand. Please introduce yourself, including the media you represent, and ask short questions to facilitate the work of our translators.
Radio. Thank you for pointing out our debate. My question though is to Andreas, because I think the politics is now more important for us than the passing of the election. I think they were free here. Generally, thank you for pointing out that we need to change the media laws and the cybercrime laws. That's very important. But my question to the head of the European Parliament, that's why I'm asking a political question, is that we have a war on the people of Palestine and Gaza. We had an incident 2 days before the elections. These had a big effect on the population in both ways. There was apathy in the elections, not enough people. 32% is very low, even though we have new parties. And secondly, we saw a big rise in the Islamist parties. So how do you as a European nation see that things that are happening across the river have a big effect on us, and the need to have a ceasefire and an end of war would have made a much bigger involvement? So I would like your political answer.
I understand why you're asking the question. We observed also that all this, what you put in a question, play a major role in the societies in the last days. But I have to disappoint you a little bit, because as election observers, we have to be strictly neutral to all the political questions carried out in the country and also in the area. Our task here was to observe the elections, if they're well done, if they're following the rules and all these things, but not, let's say, to have a foreign policy mission. These questions, probably all these questions on the region, the European Parliament will discuss next week and in the upcoming weeks in its structures like the plenary and the Foreign Affairs Committee. But sorry to understand, not today.
If I can just add that as far as the political campaign is concerned, that as part of the recommendation here, it will be that we do more training on political parties, and that is my political that is my personal observation, that political parties here need time to grow, and also